What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now in the last two episodes we dropped in the H22 and 5-speed into project CB9. In the last episode we started making the connections on the transmission and motor itself. Now we still got a little bit more steps to go, so let's see if we can go ahead and make those final connections, turn that key on the H22 and see if it fires up. So let's go ahead and get started. 1997 Honda Prelude Type SH. This is the first year of this body style. The SH was for super handling, so it had an ATTS system on here. This one just recently landed in the yard. Still has a center console, gauge cluster, surprisingly. 172,000 miles. That's not too shabby. The seats are valuable for some people, but black seats won't look right in my car. Plus this got to look like a cigarette burn right here. Side bolsters are all crushed. You can actually feel the metal right there. These have to be reupholstered, so not really worth it. I'm actually shocked that the engine is still intact. Usually these H22s are yanked out pretty quick here at pick and pull. Now what I need to grab here is the power steering hose, because it's a much wider diameter than what's on the CB9 chassis. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab this hose and the corresponding reservoir bottle, and we should be good to go. That's about the only parts I need for this car. I actually don't have the equipment to pull this engine. I don't need an engine right now, but you know, I'm pretty shocked that it's still here. This is an H22A4. So let's go ahead and grab this hose and this reservoir bottle. Okay, success. Got the power steering reservoir and hoses. Everything's disconnected without breaking anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and check the other Prelude since there's one other here in the yard and see what that has to offer. But I don't expect this engine to last long because I think they just put this Prelude in the yard, but somewhere I grabbed the valve cover because that seems to be a common occurrence with these H22s. 1998 Honda Prelude. Doors gone, interior ravaged through. Well, someone wanted something on the underside. This thing's been jacked up. I'm actually surprised that head's still there. H22 is still around also. Okay, long story short, this plastic adapter, which is a 5/8 to a 3/4, did not work because the CB9 hose was not fitting over this 5/8 opening. I went to the local hardware store and found this piece. This has got a 1/2 inch to 3/4, so I think this is gonna work a lot better. So I've already removed the cruise control temporarily so I can have better access to this hose. So I went ahead and trimmed it, and we'll go ahead and put that brass fitting on the inside here. And on the other side, this is the Honda Prelude hose that came from the junkyard. We'll go ahead and put the other piece on here. And this side will connect to the power steering pump for the H22. And we should have connection from the H22 power steering pump into the CB9 reservoir. So let's go ahead and get this connected. Alright guys, I just got done adjusting the clutch pedal arm. Basically you just take some pliers and you actually just turn this rod right here, and then once you're done you go ahead and take this 12mm bolt and tighten it up to the back side of this bracket right here. And then once that's taken care of, and then once you have that 12mm bolt tightened up, go ahead and put a cotter pin right through this pin right here. This will lock everything together. So let me go ahead and show you what proper clutch pedal adjustment looks like. So you want just a little bit of play right there, until it reaches and grabs the clutch master cylinder, and then you push down, and there you go, activate your clutch. But obviously I've got no fluid in here right now, so it has no resistance. The only resistance I have is the spring. So it's basically what you want right there. You want just a little bit of play. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that cotter pin in position, tighten that 12mm bolt. And so the next step is to put the special connector onto the slave cylinder, and then we'll fill it with fluid and we'll start bleeding out the system. Okay, finally received the piece I need for my clutch slave cylinder. The factory connector here would not connect to the stainless steel flexible clutch line that we've got in the engine bay. And this is the connector that we need. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the pin and we're gonna drive it back out of the clutch slave cylinder. We're gonna go ahead and put this piece in, slide in position, put the pin back in, and this piece right here will plug right inside of that stainless steel clutch line. I've already tested it. And apparently this is the only company that makes this part. So here's the part number and the company, Russell 640281, for your reference. Now it's time for the vacuum hoses. So as you can see here, we got 3 vacuum hoses coming out of the map sensor box. And on the CB9, they are going straight in like that, just like so. And as you can see with the H22 Prelude manifold, they're on the back side. So I don't have quite the reach in order to make that turn in there. And this here is the vacuum line assortment box I picked up at the auto parts store. Just might as well go get the assortment. I think just one piece was like $3.50. This was $13. So I'm gonna go ahead and use these couplers in order to join 2 pieces of vacuum tubing together so we can make that reach. And here on the back side, you've got this hose right here. It needs to connect into here. And then from the MAP box right here, we've got this stray hose right here. This will plug into the EGR valve port right there. So there's another complication. See this braided hose? This is supposed to plug into the top of the intake manifold. However, the H22 is a much wider diameter for the hole right there. And the CB9 is a very small hole. So if I tried to force it on there, it would probably just split the rubber. So I'm gonna have to make another splice. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna take the H22 hose, I'm gonna cut it. I'm gonna cut a little bit of the CB9 hose down here. We're gonna make it splice. And that way I'll have an adapter. So it'll plug right into the H22 intake manifold. So a little bit of complications, but we'll get this done. And how I'm gonna do that is I picked up this at the hardware store. So it's basically a 1/4 inch splicer. And that's a less harsh opening than trying to force onto here. This is slightly bigger. So I just need to make sure I use a clamp on both the Prelude line and the CB9 hose. So let's go ahead and cut this, put the splice in, put the clamps on, and put it back onto the intake manifold. Okay, I believe all the vacuum hoses are complete on the connection of the H22 for the CB9 body. This 1/4-inch splice piece was very hard to get in position. I actually put a little bit of rubbing alcohol and then tried to push this on as best I could. I was fighting this thing for about 15 minutes. Anyhow, that's the best I could do. I don't think there's gonna be any leaks. This thing is very tight. Hose clamps in position. This hose is obviously a little bit easier to get on. And now it's connected to the top of the intake manifold. And you got these 3 hoses coming out of the MAP box. I had to make an extension on this one right here. And that one goes on the first port. And you got the other 2 right there. And on the firewall, you got this back port as well. That was easy to put in. And last but not least, on the EGR valve, this connects right here and goes into the MAP box as well. Okay, next step of the process, these 2 wires we pulled from the inside of the car near the shifter. This is for the reverse light wires. I'm gonna go ahead and trim these up, solder on connections, and go ahead and connect to these connectors on the 5-speed. So let's take care of that. Okay, now it's time to fill the clutch master cylinder reservoir and the lines with some .3 or .4 brake fluid. So basically go ahead and open this cap up and start filling it up. And over down here, this is your bleeder screw. So crack that open just a little bit, put a clear rubber tube on that top of that screw, and then lead it down to this bottle on the ground. Now this is my little contraption I made. Basically I fill just a little bit of brake fluid on the bottom here so you're not sucking up air into the system as we're pumping. And so once this line is consistent with fluid and there's no more air bubbles, we know that the system is properly bled. And then we can go ahead and take the rubber tube off the bleeder valve, put the little rubber cap on, tighten things up, and the system should be bled properly. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, I believe the clutch master cylinder is now properly bled. Had the clear rubber tube here, and this was loose. So once I saw no more air bubbles coming through the fluid, I knew that the air was out of the system, and I kept having to refill the clutch master cylinder reservoir. Anyhow, disconnected the rubber tube, tightened this bolt back in position, put the rubber cap back on. And I'm gonna go inside the car, press on the clutch pedal a few times, and you're gonna see this extend out a few times. So I'm gonna give you a demonstration here. And now it's time to go ahead and mount the battery box. There's 4 12mm to hold in position. One with a special bracket, which hold on the air box. Bolt here, bolt there, and a bolt there. And here's the battery box. I may have seen better days. Tried to clean up as best I could, but looks like this thing is a fiberglass unit. As you can see, all the fibers in there. So probably add that to the junkyard list later on down the road if I find a better one. So in the meantime, we'll go ahead and install this unit. Okay, now we're on the topic of serpentine belts. Now the power steering serpentine belt for the F22 and H22 is, I believe, the same. So we'll go ahead and reuse that. Now, I went through numerous belts, going back and forth to the auto parts store, trying to find the best belt size since we put the F22 lower pulley on the H22 engine. So now we have a custom orientation. So this is a 5-rib, 44-inch belt. And here's the part number. This is a Continental. So now we're gonna go ahead and start off installing this belt first because this goes on the innermost part. So we're gonna wrap that around the alternator and AC compressor, come down into the wheel well, stretch it around the main pulley and tighten it up. Same thing with the power steering belt. I'll go ahead and put this on the power steering pump, route it down into the wheel well, and then pull it in position and tighten things up. So this bolt right here, this is the adjusting nut for the alternator. That will tighten up the alternator AC compressor belt. And this bolt right here will tighten up the power steering pump. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Okay, now it's time to install the PLM exhaust header. So we're going to start off with putting the exhaust manifold gasket here on the block, and then we'll put the main portion of the header into position. Okay, now as you can see down here on this front cross member, I had to notch out this little lip right here to accommodate this aftermarket header. This is a known issue on the CB platform, so I took my electric saw with the metal blade, carefully cut this out, then took my grinder, grinded it smooth. Took some JB weld, if there's any joints in between the two pieces of sheet metal, and then took some PR15 paint for any rust protection required. So now I believe this header should fit without any complications. So we got the main portion. We'll go ahead and attach these to the heads using a new gasket. And then we'll go on the underside of the car, attach the 2 downturns, and then last but not least, the main part that goes over the catalytic converter. So here's all the components with this PLM exhaust header. You get this main component, which bolts on the heads. And then you got these down turns, which will be reattached from the bottom of the car. And then this final portion right here, which stretches out to the catalytic converter, but there will be a gap. And I'll go ahead and show you the details on that later. Let's go ahead and get this thing installed. Okay, it is now time to install the radiator. So as you can see, this is an automatic version of the radiator. You can see that there is transmission cooling lines on here, and this hose and this hose would go to the automatic transmission. We no longer have an automatic, so what I'm gonna take this hose and I'm gonna loop it onto this part right here. So take this off, loop this right on, and we should be good to go. I don't need to buy a brand new radiator, just the fact that it's gonna be a manual version. And once I've got the lower hose in position, let me go ahead and show you how it's oriented in the engine bay. Okay, basically there's that rubber grommet right there, and there's your second rubber grommet right down there. And then once the bottom pegs are in position on the radiator, I'll go ahead and remove these two 10mm, and this will hold the top portion of the radiator in place. And after everything's secure, we'll go ahead and connect the top and bottom coolant line. Don't forget this wiring harness connection right here. All right, now it's time to install the factory air box and air tube from the CB9 into the H22 plenum. Now we have a discrepancy here. This inlet is 2 3/4, while this inlet is 2 5/8. So what I had to do is order a special coupler, which is 2 3/4, and I'm gonna branch it from here over to here, and it'll clamp it together. So that's basically how we're gonna join the air tube into the intake plenum, is with that special coupler. And then once that's joined, we'll take this tube that's branching off of the valve cover and plug it into the air tube itself. Take these clamps and clamp it up. Now I had to take this metal tube here, transfer it over from the F22 onto the H22 because this is totally different than what comes on the H22. So let's go ahead and show you that coupler. Okay, so here is the 2 3/4 by 3-inch silicone coupler with clamps. This was about $12 shipped online, came from California. It arrived yesterday, so this is perfect timing because I've been waiting on this piece. But I actually need to cut this down to about 2 1/4 for my measurements. So if this is 3 inches, just need to shave off about 3/4 of an inch. Now this coupler measures 3 inches in width, but I've only got about 2 1/4 to work with. So I need to cut off about 3/4 of an inch off of this coupler itself. Okay, now there's another discrepancy here. With this air tube, this is basically made of plastic rubber. So if I put that air tube on there, it can collapse this rubber right here. So my theory behind this is I took the F22 throttle body and I cut off the flange using a giant bandsaw and just basically filed and rounded the edges off. And so what this will do, this will basically slide on the inside of this F22 tube right here. And then once the clamp is clamping down on this, it's not going to collapse the rubber plastic right here. Okay, so I'm going to take this coupler, I'm going to put it on the end here of this air intake tube. But of course I'm going to have the metal piece on the inside, so when it clamps, it's going to clamp snugly and it's not going to collapse this plastic rubber piece. So there'll be no air leaks whatsoever.
Another year cut off my youth. Yeah, I was born to ride, but fate took off with my high fuel. Oh, everything I always wanted to do is beyond my reach as I am stuck here in this room. When I come back, will they know my face? Will our freedom
Okay, here's the car battery I bought months ago for CB9. As you can see, it's from October 2020 dated. Anyways, this thing's been sitting on the battery tender all these months. You just don't want this thing sitting on a shelf, and I don't know why I bought a brand new battery, but that's the only way I can move that car in and out of the driveway and change positions, because the original battery that came with it wouldn't hold a charge whatsoever. So go ahead and disconnect this from the battery tender, go install this in CB9, and we can go from there.
Yes, I ride into paradise. Oh, I feel stronger 'cause I belong here outside.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about fuel. I have no idea when the last time this H22 ran. I know it was wrecked on the front end and sideswiped, sat at the yard, and the yard guy and myself pulled this engine. So I've had this engine myself for about 10 months now. So another 6 months to that, so almost a year and a half at least. So let's go ahead and show you what's going on with the gas tank. All right, so right behind the driver's side rear tire, this is your gas tank right here. And this is a 17mm drain bolt. Honda was smart enough to put a drain bolt on this gas tank. I was actually gonna siphon all this gas out. I have no idea how long the gas has been in this car. I'm gonna guess a year and a half, at least 2 years. I have no idea when this thing was sitting, how long the guy was trying to sell this rolling shell. But anyhow, I drained all the gas out, put the plug back in, tightened it up, and we're gonna give it some high test fuel, because obviously the H22 wants high test gas. So let's go ahead and fill about 5 gallons of 93 octane so the engine can have some fresh fuel. Okay guys, that is the open door chime right there. And as you can see, my overhead light's on, so you know this car's got some power. Now, I'm very nervous getting to this stage. We've all been waiting for this moment. So I'm gonna do this in 2 stages. First stage, I'm gonna disconnect the coil pack from the distributor. That way, when I'm cranking a little bit on the starter, it's gonna have those pistons and overhead cams getting some lubrication with some oil. I don't know when the last time this motor ran, but we did some dry turns when we did the timing belt. So I'm gonna go ahead and test the starter out. And while we're testing it out, basically that'll kind of put some lubrication on the pistons and cams. So that's the safest bet. And stage 2, we're gonna start it officially once we reconnect the coil pack onto the distributor. And that's gonna be the true test. So I can't tell you how nervous I am, guys, but my heart's beating real quick. And this has just been a long time coming. I've never done this sort of project on a car before. But, you know, I hope that, you know, I did everything correctly and nothing blows up, or, you know, just the thing starts and runs smooth. That's just what I'm hoping for, and no funny noises. So, fingers crossed, we're gonna go ahead and do this. So let's go ahead and see if this car actually fires up and the starter works. Let's go for this. Alrighty, major accomplishments on the CB9 build. The H22 is officially started up. More details on that later, as we're officially out of time for today's episode. Now I hope you guys can continue to follow along as we get the CB9 finally tuned and ready for street usage. Now remember now, restore those vintage vehicles and don't crush them. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Go and hit that subscribe button for channel updates. Have a great day.